In this episode, you are going to learn how to earn an extra $1 million for retirement. How does that sound? You think this is fluff? Nope, this is the real deal. There are actually 8 primary strategies that I teach in my educational events. I'm only going to show you 4 of them because those are usually worth at least $250,000 for each of those. You add up 4 and that's $1 million. Would you like an extra $1 million? Watch. I'm Doug Andrew, and I've been doing what I do best at helping people understand complex things in a simple manner, especially with optimizing financial assets and minimizing unnecessary taxes for 45 years. Why do I do this? At this stage in my life, I don't reveal my age, but I am at level 67. And so I've been around the block, and I let my professional licenses automatically expire clear back at the end of 2005 to become a consumer advocate. And that's what these episodes are all about, to empower you. So this isn't about me, this is about you and your future, and I want you to understand in this episode how you can have an extra $1 million to not outlive your money. Anybody I ask, would you like an extra million? They go, I'd like just 1 million to start out with. Well, this is a way to get an extra $1 million. So I hold events, and many times I will tell people, if you come to a 4-hour workshop, which I've taught thousands of those, I will share with you 8 concepts. If you just took half of them, 4 of the 8, you should, if you're an average American, make an extra $250,000 or save a $250,000 with each of those ideas. So pick 4, and that's $1 million. Now, I don't have time in this episode to do all of them, but I'm going to choose the ones that I've highlighted here in yellow. So we're going to talk about how to increase your rate of return over 10 years, and that will generate an extra $250,000. And I'm usually talking to people who have been doing things wrong for many years, and now they're approaching retirement. They're age 50 or 55, and I show them how to come up with an extra $250,000 in just 10 years. Tax savings by converting to tax-free, because most people that I've met have money in tax-deferred IRAs or 401ks, and so I help them with a strategic rollout, and we end up usually making them an extra $250,000. There are some people we've made an extra $1.2 million or more, but this is the average. The next concept that blows people away is how to manage your real estate equity and help people get out of debt the smartest way. And they're shocked when I say it's not any way, shape, or form sending extra principal payments to the mortgage company. When I get through, it actually ends up being a $250,000 or a $500,000 or more that we created by not doing what they were doing, trying to get out of debt and pay off their house or what have you. And then last, indexed universal life, my favorite vehicle, usually saves people about $250,000 versus the fee-based fiduciaries that most people have their money in with asset managers and so forth. So those are the 4 I'm going to zero in on, and we'll just take one at a time real quick here, and I want to give you some insights. And then if you're interested, you can learn more in depth in one of my books, and I want to give you one of these books absolutely free. You just pay a nominal shipping and handling charge, and I'll fire that out to you. But let me talk about the what and the why, the how you can learn more in depth by reading. So let's start out with increasing your rate of return over where most people have their money. Most people that would come to me had their money, 80-90% of it, into vehicles like IRAs or 401ks, usually in the market, because that's what most businesses have for their employees or what have you. But Dalbar is the organization that studies investor behavior. And they say, you know what, if people would just buy and hold and not get emotional about when the market goes through its gyrations, most people would average about 9.14%. But they said that's not what happens in the real world. The actual investor return is only 3.49% because people, they get nervous when the market goes down 30, 35, 40%, and they just and they take their money out of the market, they put it in the bank earning a measly 1%, and then they wait too long to get back in the market again, and so instead of averaging 9, they're only averaging 3.49. And that's what precipitated what is called the 4% rule in the financial services industry, which I cover in another episode. If you're only averaging 3.5, which is the average in America, you pull out 4%, you're going to slowly deplete your nest egg, but not before your LE, your life expectancy. But that's pretty pathetic to only average 3.5 and be allowed to take 4%. $1 million would only give you $40,000 of income, and then you have to pay tax on that and fees on that. That's not a good way to go. My favorite vehicle, I call in my book the laser fund. In other episodes, I show that my predictable rates of return have been averaging between 8 to 10%. So 8.2% is what I've earned for more than 45 years. The last 25 years, it's been 10.07. If the industry average is 4, and it's subject to tax, you're really not netting 4, but you can reposition your money in a vehicle that's safer, earning 8. How much more is 8 than 4? That's 100% more. $1 million nest egg would generate $80,000 a year of tax-free income versus an IRA or 401k. You only are allowed to pull out 4%, or else you have to sign a waiver that you won't sue the advisor for outliving your money. And you pull out $40,000 and you pay tax on it and fees, and you might only net 20. So this is huge. That adds up so fast to an extra $250,000 based on most people's life expectancy. Let's go to the next one, tax savings converting to tax-free. Most people who would come to me were way too top heavy in yet to be taxed IRAs or 401ks because they thought they were going to be in a lower tax bracket. And that has not been true for over 25 years. And so we would do a strategic rollout. That's not a rollover. Rollover is going from a 401k into an IRA. You're just continuing to defer thinking you're saving tax. No, you're not. We have software that shows you'll pay through the nose. It'll actually cost you twice as much if you keep deferring and stringing it out thinking you're saving tax. No, you get the money out and you get the taxes over and done with in today's lower rates, but you reposition that after-tax money into tax-free vehicles. You don't have to take the income out yet, but you don't wait till you're 70 and a half and take RMDs. That's the worst advice I've ever heard. So when people convert to tax-free vehicles like the laser fund, they not only increase their rate of return, but they go from tax-deferred or taxable investments to tax-free. I only have to earn, 8% to equal what I would have to earn 12% in a tax-deferred IRA, and then have to pull out the money and pay tax to net 8. I only have to earn 8 to net 8. In a mutual fund, I'd have to earn 12 and to net 8 after tax. So that comes up with an extra $250,000 pretty quick just in tax savings that we accomplish, and increases people's net spendable income by double. How about real estate equity? Let me share with you a little concept about this. I've written complete multiple chapters on this topic. Let me explain what this can do to empower you. Most people have some of their money or their wealth accumulating in their real estate. Now, if you're one that just has a home that you're buying, that you own, or maybe you might have rental income properties. These are called non-owner occupied rental income real estate properties. Doesn't matter. A lot of people's wealth or the money they've accumulated in their life happens to be in some form of real estate, some more than others. The problem is people usually think, okay, I'm going to put money into my house. I'm going to put it into these apartment complexes, and I'm going to pay them off as fast as possible with the rental income, or I'm going to pay off my house. Now I don't have to worry about that, and I can get the rental income and live off of that. Well, I have found many people, when they retire, they are tired of being landlords if they have rental properties. They're sick and tired of taking out trash, evicting tenants, and fixing toilets and so forth. Now they're stuck with either hiring a property manager or selling it, and they have to pay a capital gain tax and so forth. Many, many times we'll help people sort of reposition that and do 1031 tax-free exchanges into other properties where they don't have to manage. We sometimes increase their rate of return by double, triple, even quadruple over where they own those rentals, let's say in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the rent multiplier is pathetic. It's only like 2.5% on the value of the property, whereas places like Memphis, Tennessee, you usually get 1% a month. It's like 12% a year. So we've had many people double, triple, quadruple their cash flow. But instead of trying to pay it off, this is what I do. Now, you don't have to do what I do, but see, instead of sending extra principal payments to the mortgage company, I always take that rental income and I put it over into my laser fund. And I'll give you a book absolutely free to learn what the laser fund is, but it's my favorite vehicle for accumulating my money tax-free. So I take that money I'd be giving to the mortgage company and I put it over my laser fund and it's compounding tax-free. Why do I do that instead of paying down my mortgage? Hello? This is what banks do. Banks make millions, billions by borrowing money at a lower rate and making a higher rate. My mortgage. If I pay 4.5% interest on my mortgage, it's tax deductible. And a 33% tax bracket, it's not costing me 4.5, it's only costing me 3. So let's say I have $1 million mortgage. My $1 million mortgage is $45,000 of interest a year. Oh, that's bad. No, it isn't. Mortgage interest is my friend, not my foe. I'm paying $45,000, but that's deductible on my tax return. In a 33% bracket, I get to wipe out $45,000 with that deduction, and so I'm able to save 1/3 of that is how it equates. And so it's not costing me $45,000, it's only costing me $30,000. I saved $15,000 in tax. So the net cost of the mortgage is only 3% if it's a gross of 4.5. I've been making 9 or 10, let's say 9. How much more is 9% over here compounding than 3%? Don't say 6. It's 300% more. Would you hire an employee for $30,000 that made you an extra $90,000? So by compounding my money over here, I'm out of debt anytime I want to be with an electronic funds transfer phone call. I can take money out of my laser fund, pay off the mortgage, but by not physically paying it off, this compounds over here. And pretty soon I'm earning 9% on a bigger balance than I'm paying 4.5% tax deductible interest on. I prove in my books this adds up to millions over a 30 or 40 year period. But over a 10-year period, no brainer. It's an extra $250,000. I would encourage you to read some of my books to see the math behind that if I went too quick. But the final is when I use my favorite vehicle, the laser fund is what I call it. It's a maximum funded tax advantage insurance contract. I like to use Universal Life, Index Universal Life, and there's only a handful of companies that I put my own money into. I have criteria in this book about how I choose the company. It is only a one-time fee. See, if I put in $500,000 to a laser fund, that would be a one-time fee maybe of $15,000, $20,000. It's done. Everything from that point forward, I just grow tax-free. There is not an annual fee charged that I have to pay an advisor. So let's use the comparison of when you buy a house. What if you went to a realtor and said, I want to buy a house, and the realtor says, well, I have two choices. I'll charge you 6% one time. So on a $500,000 house, what's that? $30,000. I'll charge you $30,000 one time and we're done. Or you can pay me 1% on the value of that house every year for as long as you're in that house. Which would you choose? Most people, when they buy a house, they'd say, oh, I just as soon pay 6% one time. But most financial planners, asset managers charge 1% every year. If you did that, you would pay nearly $1 million in fees to a fiduciary to manage that. When you finally have $1 million, they're charging you 1%, that's 10 grand. It just keeps going up. Why would you want to do that? So using the laser fund, most people save at least $250,000 over 10 years. Over 30 years, they save about $1 million over a fiduciary fee-based financial planner. So those 4 areas are the best ways that I've found to accumulate an extra $1 million. And would you like an extra $1 million? In the laser fund, you'll learn how that can generate $100,000 a year of tax-free cash flow into perpetuity without depleting principal. So if you would like a copy of this book, I want to empower you. This is something I do in my foundation. This is free to you. It's 300 pages, and if you go to laserfund.com, you just cover a nominal shipping and handling fee of about $5.95, and I will send out a copy of this absolutely free. It's actually 2 books in one. The first section is comprised of about 200 pages, 14 chapters with charts, graphs, and explanations of how this works. You flip it over this way, and this book is comprised of about 100 pages. You read it this direction, and it contains 12 chapters with 62 actual client stories. And so let me empower you with that, and you'll have options if you would like the audio version or the digital version. You can do upgrades from the physical copy. But I want to give this to you so that you can learn and take ownership of your brighter future.